Part 2 of session 34, and let's finish this talking more about catalysts and polarization. Let's begin. So far, we've talked about catalyst programming and polarization in regards to harvestability and specifically third density, and how that is related, obviously, to our day-to-day life, to our experiences. And that to me is like really important, because that helps us to put into practice how all this metaphysical knowledge and all this abstract thinking or realization of reality really, help us to deal with our reality, with our experiences, with our common day life. So I think these are really important questions and rather insights that we get for how this really works. I'm going to try, since we get deeper now into some examples like Martin Luther King and Albert Schweitzer and General Patton from Second World War, we have some really good information that we can put into context, knowing what we know already about the energy centers and how we polarize them and everything else, within this model of the law of one. So that's, to me, really important, as opposed to some other transient questions that we do get from time to time. I actually, to be honest, I enjoy the law of one, through and through. So, but I guess I'm just putting emphasis on this as regards to the practical aspect that we have for experiencing life, and how to feel ourselves, how to gauge ourselves, in terms of if we're being distracted or not. So we're gonna get into a lot of those questions. So in any case, let's start with the question that I had left out in the last video, 3410. Don says, if an entity were to be strongly biased toward positive societal effects, what would this do to his yellow ray in the aura, as opposed to an entity who wanted to create an empire of society and govern it with an iron fist? What would be the difference in the yellow ray activity of these two entities? So the question now goes, just to get a refresher, into how would it look for a positive entity or a negative entity in terms of their yellow ray development. And Don says an empire of society and govern with an iron fist. That's the negative one. And what would be the difference between the yellow ray activity of these two entities, a positive and a negative one? And here is where Ra gives the examples of MLK and Albert Schweitzer. So they start with Schweitzer. Ra says, let us take two such positively oriented active souls no longer in your physical time-space, meaning they're dead at that time. And they keep saying the one known as Albert, who went into a strange and to it a barbaric society in order that it might heal. This entity was able to mobilize great amounts of energy and what you call money. This entity spent much green ray energy both as a healer and as a lover of your instrument known as the organ. This entity's yellow ray was bright and crystallized by the efforts needed to procure the funds to promulgate its efforts. However, the green and blue rays were of a toweringly brilliant nature as well. The higher levels, as you may call them, being activated. The lower, as you may call them, energy points remain in a balanced being. Quite bright. So Schweitzer is a great example of a positively oriented individual who really energized its yellow ray energy center. They say, and I think it's really notable that they say it was crystallized. Yellow ray was bright and crystallized. That means that his perspective of reality within the yellow lens was so pure that obviously development and activation of green and blue were almost perfect too. I mean, there was so much energy flowing there. Remember, if we have yellow ray crystallized, that means that our lower, or the lowest ones, red and orange, are flowing with a lot of energy. I mean, there's very little or no blockages. That means that all the energy is going to the heart and the throat in our chakra system. So that's the first thing to note. Schweitzer, for the little research that I did, because I didn't know anything about him until I read it in the Law of One. You can see the genius in people when they have the talent for art, specifically music. I believe music is one of the most beautiful arts because it represents so much the flow of nature in terms of harmony. And he was a genius in music. He was able, I believe one of the things that he did was being able to notice the perception of some paintings in terms of the music in terms of painting. There was something about the visual that he would see that his instructor, I believe, was like baffled by, because he never thought about this type of association. So as a musician, he was a genius, but also he felt a call for medicine and healing people. That's why Ra says this entity was able to mobilize great amounts of energy and what you call money, because that was for his effort in healing people. Like I said, you can read about him, Albert Schweitzer. I'll leave a link in the description. Hopefully I don't forget. I tend to do that. But yeah, if you want to read more about him and see what a strongly or a crystallized yellow ray entity looks like, or looked like back then, we're talking about 1800 and 1900 century. So I believe around there. He was born in 1870, and I mean he died pretty old age, if I remember correctly. So he was alive up until pretty late in the 19th century. So, and they also say, however, the green and blue rays were of a toweringly brilliant nature as well. So see, once the yellow ray of a positively oriented individual is crystallized, meaning that it has a really good perception of other people as himself. It doesn't have to be within the philosophy as we see it. It's only a perception. It's a feeling of wanting to help other people. It's almost like, that's why I call it instinctual. It's a bad word because instinctual we associate it with animals, so it's almost like a reactive thing. But that's probably the best word I can use for this reactivity that we have once we have a certain perception. It's automatic. I mean, you can't go back. What's been seen cannot be unseen, So the higher levels, as you may call them, being activated. The lower, as you may call them, energy points remain in a balanced being, quite bright. So the lower centers were quite bright, and the higher levels were being activated. So and see the terms that they use. Green and blue rays were of a toweringly brilliant nature. So as the energy is flowing from the lower energy centers, and it's just brilliantly, empowered by this, your green and blue rays are going to just be shining a lot. So, this, of course, what this means is not, in terms of visuals. Obviously, we're talking about his perception of unconditional love and wisdom, as in acceptance too. I mean, there's so many things that Albert Schweitzer here depicts to us, and is that perception of self and other selves in terms of love and wisdom, because that's essentially what we're looking for when we want to allow this energy to flow, is that it's not impaired by our blockages in our lower energy centers. And as we allow this, then that energy can be spent in seeing reality from a loving perspective and wisdom, balancing it with wisdom. That's why the two of them work together, 4 and 5. Green and blue, they work together. It's our minds in the esoteric representation of it. Our body is the lower energy centers, red, orange, yellow. Our mind is green, blue, which is love and wisdom. That's what our mind is for. And then the rest is spiritual, indigo and violet. So again, really good example here for without even knowing too much about Albert Schweitzer, you can just see how somebody manifests that way in our human reality. So, all right, the next example, Ross says, the other example is the entity Martin Luther King. This entity dealt in a great degree with rather negative orange ray and yellow ray vibratory patterns. However, this entity was able to keep open the green ray energy, and due to the severity of its testing, if anything, this entity may be seen to have polarized more towards the positive due to its fidelity to service to others in the face of great catalysts. So here we have another example of somebody who we do know a lot about because he was a popular figure, and all his actions are very well known in the United States and even globally. He's pretty well regarded. I grew up in Venezuela, and I assure you that I heard about him since I was a youngster. So his teachings or his views of the world were global. So, and then a couple of things I want to clarify here, because this can be misinterpreted. And the way I see it, I've heard a couple of interpretations, and I see the direction that they have, but I see something different here. Let's see. Ross says, the other example is Martin, and this entity dealt with a great degree, words are important here. This entity dealt in a great degree with rather negative orange ray and yellow ray vibratory patterns. People may interpret this as, he was being negative because he dealt with these patterns, meaning that he used these patterns. That's not true. People may say, he had to deal with, the influence of these things. That's partially true. Or he was around people who were, negatively oriented. That could be true as well. I don't know. But the way I interpret this is that he had to deal with the circumstances of a great degree of negative orange and yellow ray. We know his work was about equality in not only the black race, but in poverty also, and other, equality philosophies, and everything that he talked about, justice as well. In so many ways, this was his work. He was confronting in his time a lot of negative orientation around him. Like he was murdered, so you can see that there was a lot of negativity in his work, as opposed to Albert Schweitzer. See, like Albert Schweitzer was dealing with a different experience. He was a healer, he was a musician, he was involved in those in that scenario. Obviously, I'm not saying one is better than the other. They both served, but it was a little bit more harmonious, say, for Schweitzer than for MLK, because he was dealing with a lot of racism, of course, discrimination, and threats, all this negative stuff that was going around him. He had to deal with that. So again, if we read it, they say this entity dealt in a great degree with rather negative orange ray and yellow ray vibratory patterns, of course. And the more for him to be able to use this, to shine, because he was dealing with a very negative environment, which we're also going to get when we talk about war. I'll mention something similar. I talk about Muhammad Ali in the last video, I think it was. And, they keep saying, however, this entity was able, MLK, was able to keep open the green ray energy. And due to the severity of its testing, see, the testing was all the experiences that he was having, the surroundings, the environment in general. If anything, this entity may be seen to have polarized more towards the positive due to its fidelity to service to others in the face of great catalysts. See, they say again, testing, severity of testing, and great catalyst. So all these things are experience. What's testing him if not the environment? What is the great catalyst that he was facing if not the environment in which he was involved? So that's what they mean, with dealing with a great degree of negative orange ray and yellow ray. Once again, orange meaning identity and obviously, discrimination. Yellow ray, power over others, which is slavery and the rest of all. And I'm not talking about slavery as we knew it, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. I'm talking about slavery as we know it in terms of monetary discrimination and the way, we are enslaved basically by the Matrix. So, that's all things that he realized. I mean, MLK was way beyond, the surface understanding or comprehension of society. He was very deep into knowing what this system was about. So, it's and you see, you can notice that two people in different yellow ray circumstances, how they react and how it affects them in their polarization as they open their green ray, because he had, even though he was dealing with a lot of that, he continually opened, because he was service to others oriented. So, all right. So, the next question is just because Ra talks. It's funny because Ra. I'll make a mention after this. Don asks, to give the last names of Albert and Martin, which we already know is Albert Schweitzer and Martin Luther King. And I'll just say that it's funny because I tended to have that. I would call people by their first name. And funny, I remember a story when I was reading Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire, and I was talking to my friend, talking about the author George Martin, and I just said George, and he said, "What do you mean George? Like, you know him?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I meant Martin. We're talking about George Martin, so I can call him George, right?" So Rob just used the first names and forgot we have last names. So I know what it feels as a human. So next question of importance. Don says, I thought that was correct, but I wasn't sure. Can you give me the same type of information that we have been getting here with respect to the unmanifested self, interacted between self and gadgets, toys, etc., inventions? So, refresher from 2 videos ago, we talked about it in session 33, and in the last video too, questions about catalyst that is presented by the unmanifested self, that is catalyst that is unrelated to other self interaction. That was Don's initial question. Other than other selves interaction, catalysts through that interaction, what are the other types of catalysts that are produced by the self? And one of them was the self in relation to societal other selves, meaning self with third density situation, tribe, group, society in general. And this was one of them, our relationship with toys, gadgets, and inventions, and so on. So now Don is asking, again, within that line of questions that were about the manifested self, the self in societal self, and now with gadgets and toys. We're going to get into war as well. Again, so Ra says, in this particular instance, we again concentrate, for the most part, in the orange and in the yellow energy center. In a negative sense, many of the gadgets among your peoples, that is, what you call your communication devices and other distractions, such as the less competitive games, may be seen to have the distortion of keeping the mind-body-spirit complex unactivated so that yellow and orange ray activity is much weakened, thus carefully decreasing the possibility of eventual green ray activation. I think this is important now more than ever, because as seekers, what we're trying to do is to have as much catalyst as possible in terms of the experiences that we have, so we can allow the energy of this experience to flow through the lower energy centers and up to the heart and our throat chakra, which is the mind. We're developing the mind in essence here. We came from animals, we're now humans, and we have consciousness. So what do we develop? Our mind. And our mind is the heart and the throat in terms of the chakras, love and wisdom. So if there is not enough energy flowing through that, there's not enough intensity going through, the fluidity of the energy is not powerful enough, then we have a weak mind, a weak heart, and or love and wisdom balance. So in terms of, and this is again 1981, they were talking about just the technology back then. This remains, and they say, okay, negatively, in a negative sense, many of the gadgets among your peoples, that is what you may call communication devices, that would be, now we have this monster, which is a communication device of all possible ways. I mean, everything is encapsulated there. People's lives are in there, which is crazy. It's just, I'm not addicted to it, but I know the possible addictions that are created by this, and I depend on it a lot. So you can see in your own self how much we have put our value of the life experience into these devices. Now back then they were talking about only communication devices, say it's like TV, radio, and so on. There was no internet back then, of course. So such as the less competitive games too. Those are the games that keep you kind of numbed, and we are well known for that. I mean, if you see in my back wall, I am a remnant of this. So I played all my life, non-competitive games, and this may be seen to have distortion of keeping the mind body spirit complex unactivated, so that yellow and orange ray activity is much weakened. So it's not creating blockages themselves, it's just not allowing the energy to flow. There's not enough experience because you are numbed by this. And I mean, when I tell you, I'm saying by experience. I used to spend hours and hours on end, 12 hours a day or more, 8 hours a day, just playing video games. And nothing against video games, of course. I mean, I would be very cynical to talk about video games in this way. But used in this way, it just weakens it, and that's just the truth. I mean, see, here's the distinction where you know that you do what you want to do, but you must be aware of what's happening and what you are depriving yourself from. So, thus carefully decreasing the possibility of eventually green ray activation. Of course, how can you possibly open your heart when you are dealing with synthetic experiences that are just artificial? They are there, they're providing you entertainment and distraction, yes. Again, I'm not saying anything against it. I would be very cynical, once again, but it is what it is. The more you spend time, doing those things, and I still play video games. I'm not gonna lie. The more you spend, you have to know what you're doing. So that is what's causing a weakening of those energy centers, because it's not allowing you to have those experiences. That's just how it is. So Ra goes on with more information about this and say, others of your gadgets may be seen to be tools whereby the entity explores the capabilities of its physical or mental complexes, and in some few cases the spiritual complex, thus activating the orange ray in what you call your team sports, and in other gadgets such as your modes of transport. These may be seen to be ways of investigating the feelings of power, more especially power over others or a group power over another group of other selves. So, see, there's another side of this, again, and I guess I'm biased to interpret it this way. When they say others of your gadgets may be seen to be tools whereby the entity explores the capabilities of its physical or mental complexes, talking about computers maybe, or any sort of technology, gadgets, I associate them with technology itself, that allows the development of, the physical and the mental complex, because we're using our mind and our bodies to to devise these things and to work with them too. So it's you can use it both ways, I guess. Some of the stuff, and in some few cases the spiritual complex, I'm not sure how that could be done. I can come up with examples, but I'll be speculating, so I won't. Thus activating the orange ray in what you call your team sports and in other gadgets such as your modes of transport. Modes of transport, I'm not sure what they mean. I read somewhere that it could be like, say, modes of transports are cars or vehicles, and racing could be that, or it could be also association of ourselves with, say, sports and vehicles. I don't know, people who have fascination with cars, maybe, I don't know. These may be seen to be ways of investigating the feelings of power, more especially power over others. This could be, I think they're talking about sports here, because sports, it's a competitive thing. And, you can see that mentality of the I'm not going to say all of them, but the reigning mentality in sports is to be, to dominate the other. So you're exploring that. I'm not saying you're polarizing towards the negative if you play sports, but you are exploring that, and you're seeing what, how does that feel? Did you play sports and you beat another team, and did you feel sort of compassion for their mistakes and so on? That's fine. That is a way to explore it. Did you feel like you own them and they're dirt and whatever? I mean, you're exploring that negative possession, that you are superior and all this stuff. So it's exploring yellow ray and orange ray activity. So again, the question had to do with this. So sports can be seen that way. Again, going back to the vehicles, it could be, if not about sports, then it could be my possessions, maybe. I don't know. My car is better than yours. I don't know. I really don't know what they meant, but by modes of transport. And yeah, so it's really how you use this for experiencing love and wisdom. There could be a way in which you use video games for that. If you're using a cooperative game with other people and you do things for them so they can feel happy, who knows? I mean, there's so much to go into this that it's not to say that something is good or bad. And I wish at this point everybody would transcend from that mentality, that dualistic mentality, just seeing what the opportunity presents to you to use it, for polarizing yourself. Not even polarizing, forget that word. It's just for having an experience, having an experience, and how do you feel reflected in that. So I think that's it's good enough analysis of these questions for the time being. Don says, next, what is the general overall effect of television on our society with respect to this catalyst? 1981 television. Now it's internet. Ra says, without ignoring the green ray attempts of many to communicate via this medium such information, truth and beauty as may be helpful, we must suggest that the sum effect of this gadget is that of distraction and sleep. More than ever, I'll say it again, this guy right here, this device that we call a smartphone, has the potential for both things. The computer itself, the computer is kind of phased out, I believe. I'm probably one of the few ones that still uses a old school, tower, PC tower, and my monitor as well. I don't know. Maybe people who also work, creating videos and so on. Smartphone for me was just like an extension that I used for a couple of things, but I wasn't really involved with all of it. Actually, coming out of my shell, as I remember, I was not involved in social media. If you check my social media for the past 10 years, I rarely used it. I played with it a couple of times, but I was never an avid user of social media. And it wasn't until now that I decided to use it for just expressing myself, and that's what I use for. That's it, So, in any case, this is what the effect is. I remember in 2008 is when I finally realized I never was a TV guy. Watch TV, as a mode of, again, distraction. Sit there and watch TV, but not too much. 2008 is when I completely unmarried myself from TV and programs and all that stuff, once I realized what was going on behind the scenes in the government and the elite and TV and all this stuff, and I just said, all right, last time I watched TV. So in any case, so I say TV itself would be and we, again, I'll keep extrapolating to the internet, because that's now our way of communication. Without ignoring that, meaning that, you know, there is some green ray attempts of many to communicate, and this also is Blu-ray. But remember, green ray can only be expressed through the Blu-ray. So, communicate via this medium such information, truth, beauty, as may be helpful, we must suggest that the sum effect of this gadget is that of distraction and sleep. Distraction for the people that are, again, now I'm sure there's people who are addicted to the new TV, which is all the variation of channels like Hulu, Netflix, and so on. I don't know. I don't know all the channels. I barely know Netflix. So, you know, that's another type of addiction. Like, what show is going on? You know, what am I going to watch? YouTube could be another one. You know, that there's an addiction to that. So, yeah, maybe pause this video and go outside to nature. So, without ignoring, you know, the attempts of communicate, you know, beauty, information. I believe what I'm communicating. I guess I'm biased, you know, but this is, I don't know, I'm just doing it because I like doing it. So, we suggest blah blah blah. Okay, so yeah, the distraction comes there. You know, how much time do you spend? Is like the video games. How much time do you spend, you know, on a video game that doesn't allow you to interact with other people and to share information, share experiences? And one of the things that I've noticed, you know, with this generation, probably the past generation as well. I'm 38, so, you know, I'm talking about people in their 20s. No offense, but it's true, and you might be, you know, related to this, is that there is few human-to-human communication. I worked with people of this age, and it was incredible. There was only a few people who could sustain a conversation. Like, I know I'm gonna sound old here, but like the old days, you know, you meet somebody and you talk about, you know, you have a full conversation, and it's now more delegated to the phone. You know, I'll send you a text, or, you know, this, and even there's a disassociation with the connection between people, and it's just like, I would rather deal with you over the phone than in person. How much experience and catalyst is being lost there? Possibilities, again, you know, that will come again at some point. It's just me, maybe being an old man, but there is experience that is there, you know, and I would rather deal, and I always said this, especially at work and with other people that I had to interact with in society. I said, again, I feel very old saying this, but I said, you know, let's talk about this personally. I feel like there's a lot of energy going on, you know, when we talk in person, and I'm all for it. I'm actually, I'm an avid personal, you know, conversation guy. That seems to be, you know, transformed now. There's all about, you know, just texting and, you know, indirect relationship with others. So this is, there's a lot of distraction, not only from the environment, but even from interaction between, you know, other people, you and others. And then sleep. They don't mean sleep in the way we talk about sleep. They talk about sleep in the sense of spiritual sleep. When we talk about awakening, that this is sleep. This is the opposite. So, you know, this keeps you asleep, but it can also wake you up. So, in any case, you know, it's I'll just finish up with saying that, you know, it's not that something is good or bad. It's how you use it and what you use it for, and what is your orientation. So there's no devil or, you know, God or angel, whatever. You know, it's just how you use it. You know, how do you feel about it? And if you're fine being that way, maybe I'm, you know, just being this old man saying that we should interact more humanly, you know, person to person, when the opportunity is possible, as opposed to being afraid of the human interaction and rather using, you know, communication devices to talk to other people. I mean, it helps to connect, but if I'm living next to you, then what's the point? Let's have a personal conversation. And this happened to me a lot. So I guess I sound emphatic because I was, in this situation before, where there was no human communication. It was rather like, let's talk through electronics and bits. So, in any case, I'm ranting. Next question. Don says, can you give me the same type of information that we have been working on now with respect to the self-relationship with war and rumors of war? And now we're going to what I said, catalyst provided by war and rumors of war. Ross says, you may see this in relationship to your gadgets. This war and self-relationship is a fundamental perception of the maturing entity. There is a great chance to accelerate in whatever direction is desired. One may polarize negatively by assuming bellicose attitudes for whatever reason. One may find oneself in the situation of war and polarize somewhat towards the positive, activating orange, yellow, and then green by heroic, if you may call them this, actions take to preserve the mind-body-spirit complexes of other selves. Ra has more to say, and I'll leave that after I address this paragraph. Now we're talking about catalysts provided by war for the person. How you relate. See, once again, I'm not saying the war is good or bad. That's up to people, but it really is how you interact with it. Just like team sports. How do you feel? Do you feel compassion? Do you feel like it's all a game? Let's just have fun, or do you feel like you're dominating others and you are the alpha male there? How do you deal with that? So with war is the same thing, because you can see they say there's a great chance to accelerate in whatever direction is desired, because war is like the ultimate way in saying like, all right, we have the situation. What are you going to do? Are you going to go and kill people? Throw bombs at them, destroy their communities, their houses, their residents. You don't need to know the motive. Just be patriotic, and they're attacking us. Whatever excuse there is for war. How are you going to react to that? Now, there's two ways. Of course, you can refrain from it, or you can participate. If you participate, that doesn't mean that you're being polarizing towards the negative. They say one may find oneself in the situation of war and polarize somewhat towards the positive, activating orange, yellow, and then the green ray by heroic actions. Saving your comrades, your people, or even saving the enemy. That's happened. You realize that it's another human being who is trying, to kill you because of the same reasons, and you realize, you have a higher consciousness. There's so much that can go within, certain aspects, and it's a very limited perception to demonize, the military just for that. I believe that, if anything, the military, as an industrial complex, yes, is it's a negative. It's obviously from the group of Orion, but the people are there. They're just like the medical industry. Obviously, that is Orion group influenced, but the people there are, people who want to do good. People who want to do, good things for the world and for people. They're there to serve people. They want to do that. Of course, there's always the negatives who are polarizing, in both ways there. So, in any case, this can be used that way, and I think it's a beautiful, catalyst that exists in our reality, because it really makes you choose. In the end, what are you going to do? I used the example of Muhammad Ali, again, second time I said in this video, but I think it fits perfectly here because of the next slide that we're going to talk about. But yeah, it's whatever direction you want to polarize is there, and it's going to, just imagine having the possibility. It's hard to do it in society if you're evil, because you have morals and all this stuff. In war, there is no morals. You can do whatever you want. You can kill even your own comrades if you want to. That has happened too, obviously. Ask the Russians, or even the US too. They did it. So, in any case, I'm not here to judge. It just happened. So, next slide. Rag says, finally, one may polarize very strongly third ray. And that asterisk there is because they made a mistake. They meant to say fourth ray, heart. So they say, one may polarize very strongly fourth ray by expressing the principle of universal love at the total expense of any distortion towards involvement in bellicose actions. In this way, the entity may become a conscious being in a very brief span of your time-space. This may be seen to be what you would call a traumatic progression. It is to be noted that among your entities, a large percentage of all progression has, as catalyst, trauma. So, I alluded to this already, which is the positive polarization that you can have when the government calls for your aid in going to war. And you may say, thank you, but no thank you. Again, Muhammad Ali, great example for this. He said, no, I'd rather go to jail, but I'm not going to jail because I'm not, this is not fair. I want justice, and, this is just a great example. So, in this way, the entity may become conscious being in a very brief span of time. I mean, once again, you can see the strong catalyst that is there for people to refrain from these actions and realize, what they're doing and saying, okay, no, I'm not going to participate in this, bellicose nature that we have. I'm just going to stay put where I am, and I'm going to stay true, no matter if they want to imprison me, if they want to kill me, if they want to do whatever. You do not want to do that. So it's a great, think about the consequences once you die, and you realize that, all the bodies that you killed were just bodies. It's just your intention of killing them. And you realize and you say, oh, crap, I didn't really want to be this way. So now I gotta go back and fix all this stuff. And I gotta deal with the karma and everything else. Or, saying, you know what, you want to kill me? Kill me. I don't care. I'm not gonna go kill other people. Boom, you got killed. You wake up in time space and say, oh, nice, I did the right, I took the right choice, took the right path. So, you all of a sudden realize that, you just have a bigger heart, a shinier green ray. So, it is to be noted that among your entities, a large percentage of all progression has as catalyst trauma. Trauma is a very important word because we experience life as traumatic events. Everything that we have can be caused, everything that we carry in our shoulders, it's weighing us, can be called trauma. Something that we didn't process earlier. So this is, the great catalyst. It's there. That's why going through Dark Night of the Soul, if you're familiar with that, then you know what it is to release trauma, to release that which you are not, that you're carrying because you think it's yours, because you think you are it. So it's interesting how they say, right, this may be seen to be what you call traumatic progression because they're not, I don't see it so much as traumatic, I would say, but I guess for somebody, who is denying to participate in war and has, consequences and very dire consequences, then it could be a trauma. But they're mentioning that, trauma is a big thing for us here. So remember, since I seem to be talking about, my life and anecdotes a lot, so I'll just throw in one more, is that I can, in retrospective, I can see that I give you a little bit of my background. I was born in the US and I was raised in Venezuela. I left when I was a kid. That's why my English is sort of limited. So I came back when I was over 22, I believe, 22, 23 years old. And I noticed that I kind of skipped the military. If you know my age, you know that by 2001, where the war against Afghanistan and subsequently Iraq started, I was ripe for that. I was barely even 20 years old when that happened. So I could have gotten involved back then. Not sure if I could have, because I have an issue with my eye, which is another story. But the point is that now that I see, into my past, I can see that I could have been there, but I wasn't here. So that, kept me away from it. And not that I would have, I was never into military. Just a funny story again, and we'll keep going. I don't know why I keep adding this stuff, but why not? I used to be, my friend in Venezuela used to make fun of me, saying that I was going to be a really bad American because I was not interested in the military, police, drugs or alcohol, sports at all, cars, guns, all those things that are very American, that everybody has some sort of, background on it, or they love talking about it. It's like a cultural thing. And I was not very, interested in all that. I was a nerd. I was a pretty nerdy person. So, I just wasn't interested in all that. So maybe I wasn't going to go to war anyways, but, I guess I planned for it. So I was, not involved in war. But I mean, I could have, in 2001, who knows? But anyways, I seem to have programmed against that. So I'm grateful for my higher self, my unmanifested self, or whatever you want to call it. Don says, question 3415, continuing with the law of one and not with my life. You just used the term third ray in that statement. What's that meant? The term you meant to use? Did we correct that already? Ra says, we intended the green ray. Our difficulty lies in our perception of red ray and violet ray as fixed. Thus the inner rays are those which are varying and are to be observed as those indications of seniority in the attempts to form and harvest. Here is when we talk about color therapy before, and Don was talking about colors and all this stuff. This gives me insight into how perception is, of course, from sixth density. There is no such thing as colors. They just know we see colors because we're humans and we have decoding devices called eyes that interpret frequencies of energy and vibration in terms of colors, hues of colors. So, see, they make this mistake very often when they say green or blue or yellow or even orange and red, I believe. And, they're trying to use words that to them make no sense, but referring to a specific portion of what they perceive. And so they're making their explanation here, saying that their difficulty lies in their perception of red ray and violet ray being fixed. That's what they see. They see the end sides of our spectrum of beingness, because those are the ones that matter for harvestability. So you say, does the inner rays, anything in between violet and ray, it's kind of like, a mix that is going on. It's almost like the music playing, whereas this, just for visualization, it's like the string, that is attached to a music instrument. It's, it's fixed at those 2 points, and depending on how, tight they are, then you can see, what type of frequency it's playing. So we are doing the same thing, and they can only see those 2. So the frequency or the vibration that is caused by the cord, I'm just making this up here, can be perceived as vibration that is, changing all the time. And that's why they say the inner rays are those which are varying and are to be observed as those indications of seniority in the attempts to form a harvest. So I would say the when you strike a chord or a string, then that emits a sort of sound, and that sound is what they're seeing. Oh, okay, that sound, it sounds like you are ready for harvest, or it sounds like you're not ready for harvest. But the in between all those, then they don't see him very well. They probably need to analyze it too much. I don't know. It's just a macro perspective of how they perceive things. So in any case, hope that makes sense. My whole analogy with the string and the musical instrument. So Don says, question 3416, would the red ray, an intense red ray, then be used as an index for seniority system of incarnation, as well as the intense violet ray? Here Ra's going to give us more insight. Ra says, this is partially correct. In the graduation or harvesting of fourth density positive, the red ray is seen only as that which, being activated, is the basis for all that occurs in vibratory levels, the sum of this being violet ray energy. So before we go any further here, again, see, now not so much from the instrument perspective, but from, the instrument that we are, red ray being the foundation of it, Malduk, Malkut is its name, and red ray, energy center. the grounding energy center. That's what's allowing energy flowing through the rest of our energy system. If that is bright, then it means that there's a lot of energy. But if the mix is all messed up here, then the violet ray can be sort of weak. So that balance is really what they're looking for. When they see the sum, which is the violet ray, they see the origin and they see the sum of all the vibration that occurs in the energy centers: orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo. So they say in graduation or harvesting to 4 density positive, the red ray is seen only as that which, being activated, is the basis for all that occurs in vibratory levels, the sum of this being violet ray energy. Important point here, they're talking about positive harvesting. Positive is concentrated in all of them, all the 5 other energy centers, because you need energy flowing through them and going to the heart and through your throat chakra and indigo ray. So it needs to be flowing, it needs to be balanced and vibrating well within harmony there. So that's important to keep in mind. Again, red and violet are fixed because they cannot go distorted in too much of a sense. Violet ray gets distorted only because of the nature of the distortions in the other energy centers. So it's a reflection of those. Whereas every other energy center has distortions of its own, not violet ray. And red ray is just allowing the energy to flow. So Ross says this violet ray is the only consideration for 4th density positive. In assessing the harvestable 4th density negative, the intensity of the red as well as the orange and the yellow rays is looked upon quite carefully, as a great deal of stamina and energy of this type is necessary for the negative progression, it being extremely difficult to open the gateway to intelligent infinity from the solar plexus center. This is necessary for harvest in 4th density negative. Okay, now the difference is that, remember, the negative closes or shuts the heart completely so it can energize the lower energy centers. So now red ray plays a more important role in terms of how intense that is, because that will also reflect upon the other 2. You have to have a very intense, like all your energy is being retained there, sustained there. You're not allowing the heart to open at all. So all the energy that you're harnessing, you are using for negative orientation, which is again closing the heart, love of the self, which is all concentrated in perception of self and group or manipulating others for the self. So it's almost like you're regurgitating the whole energy into a small radius field here, or diameter. And then they say there is a great deal of stamina and energy that is necessary to open the gateway to intelligent infinity. Gateway to intelligent infinity, it's up here, the spiritual. So getting into the spiritual communication with intelligent infinity requires a lot of energy use in the lower energy centers, starting from the solar plexus. They say, I guess that's the highest energy center they can achieve, and from there, and obviously manipulating others, that's how you end up crystallizing, I guess, the yellow energy center, so you can progress as a negative. This is necessary for harvest in 4 density negative. This is really important because otherwise they won't be able to sustain the vibrations of love and understanding. That's a question that I get sometimes, like how can negative who are not loving can get to 4th density? Well, they're not loving with others, but they're extremely loving with themselves, so they can definitely go to 4th density negative. Love for self, and continue to polarize there, because now they have control over social memory complexes. If they want, not control, but they could go up in the hierarchy that they established, so they can have their own social memory complex, sort of like the Orion group has. So anyhow, it's a good side question that Don had there. So Don continues and says, is it possible for you to use as an example our general pattern and tell me the effect that war had on him in his development? Ross says, this will be the last full question of this working. The one of whom you speak, known as George, was one in whom the programming of previous incarnations had created a pattern. I love how they say George. just like I said, George, before. Or inertia, which was irresistible in its incarnation in your time-space. This entity was of a strong yellow ray activation with frequent green ray openings and occasional blue ray openings. However, it did not find itself able to break the mold of previous traumatic experiences of a bellicose nature. I'm just going to finish this. This entity polarized somewhat towards the positive in this incarnation due to its singleness of belief in truth and beauty. This entity was quite sensitive. It felt a great honor duty to the preservation of that which was felt by the entity to be true, beautiful, and in need of defense. This entity perceived itself as a gallant figure. It polarized somewhere towards the negative in its lack of understanding the green ray it carried with it, rejecting the forgiveness principle which is implicit in universal love. Finally, Ra says, the sum total of this incarnation, vibrationally, was a slight increase in positive polarity, but a decrease in harvestability due to the rejection of the law or way of responsibility. That is, seeing universal love, yet it's still fought on. So, General Patton, World War II, General, of course, he, I'm not too familiar with his story. By the looks of it, he had, obviously, I mean, this is Ron's perspective, so it knew more about him in this sense than anybody else, I suppose. He had previous incarnations where he had traumatic experience in terms of war. So because of that, he was oriented again towards war. But in this incarnation, last incarnation, and we'll find out more about that in the next and final question, he found the possibility of seeing love, seeing beauty, and his direction was towards, preserving that beauty that he found. So it sounds to me like he kind of opened the perception of what is real in the world, what is universal love, and caring for those things. So he had frequent openings of the green ray, I believe they said. So it's almost like at moments he would say, wow, this is really worth fighting for, or really worth fighting for, not in war, but, just preserving it. Maybe he associated, with his, act in war. So he had those not rejections. We'll get to the rejection in a little bit. It polarized somewhat positive in the incarnation because he saw those possibilities of love, of course. He was quite sensitive, which again, that seems to be a programming from the higher self to me. Being quite sensitive to certain things. It felt a great honor duty to the preservation of that which is true and beautiful and in need of defense, of course. He preserved... this I know. There was somebody who later on, I think it was in the 60s or 70s, I remember reading that, they said he was quite arrogant. And I guess that's what Ross is saying, when he perceived itself as a gallant figure. I mean, arrogant, just very egocentric. Like he had not in a bad way, of course, but just, he had a good sense of self, that ego self. It polarized somewhat towards the negative because, see, he rejected that. And this is why the next phrase, when they say that rejection of the law or way of responsibility, they use law and way interchangeably, Ra. So the law of responsibility is something that you acquire once you feel love and you understand the mechanics or nature of love, then you're responsible for that. This also is applied with higher understandings. When you expand your consciousness, you are responsible for that expressing of consciousness, for making that consciousness available to others, to radiate it. Let's just put it that way, to radiate that. I'm not gonna say, share it with others or do a specific activity, but to radiate it. So you are responsible for that. If you're not, then you're not following the law of responsibility. Imagine you learn something and you need to share it. You feel this urge to share it, but you have too many blockages because you feel insecure or whatever, and it's going to benefit other people, but you don't. Then you're not following the law of responsibility. So General Patton polarized towards a positive because it was able to see the universal love in its incarnation. And, that's some positive polarization because you're now seeing it. And you're able to, say, wow, this is new for me in my soul stream. But a decrease in harvestability because of the rejection of those things that it learned. So the next time that he incarnates, and we'll get to that right away, where Don says, do we have enough time for me to ask if the death almost immediately after the cessation of the war of this entity, could that have been so that it could be immediately reincarnated to possibly make harvest? And Ra says, this is precisely correct. A couple of things we can get here, just to finish up with Patton. He died immediately after the war, probably, I think it was within a year or two, car accident, and he, I think the other people were safe, and he died, I don't remember correctly, but he died immediately after the war. And I mean, he was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, I believe, until he eventually died. And he was, his reflection of self, he said it was a horrible way of dying or whatever. But you can see now, based on what Ra says, and the question that Don asked was basically, did he die right away after the war so he can incarnate again and kind of fix those things and have increase his possibility for harvest? And Ra says this is precisely correct. He died so he could be harvested or work towards harvesting by a quick reincarnation, which he did. So General Patton was back, or is still back with us here in another body. Isn't that awesome to think and know? Just to have somebody like that we know from historical background. This is why it's so important for you to not know who you were in your past life. Imagine this person associating himself or herself with, General Patton and feeling, oh my God, I was that person. How am I going to judge it? Who knows? So, and the other thing is how that we can see here, and I'll finish, the before the conclusions, is that we have a sort of self-correcting mechanism. I don't even want to call it self-correcting mechanism, but the higher self is always looking at, what is the progress of the entity, and see how it programmed really fast for his death so he can be reincarnated again, especially since we're coming close on harvest, and he was probably, at the point of being harvested because of his frequent green ray opening, so he had a good possibility there. Seniority, of course, of incarnation was at play, so I'm assuming he was there. So much to get out of this, but just, the mechanism that exists between higher self and the incarnation and the soul stream as it's being gathered, all the information is being gathered for polarization. So that's it's a good insight. Conclusions now. We finished session 34, and we discuss a lot of catalyst information. Not that this is the last time we're going to talk about it. I forget if in session 35 we're going to discuss it or not, but so far we've got a lot of information about catalysts as it is in our lives, and what is it supposed to be. Again, we explore the possibilities of having catalysts through gadgets and the war, or rumors of war, ourselves and societal self, and other selves, which we know basically how that works. In essence, anything that is available to us to process that can be an experience that gives us some sort of challenge. That's the thing. A challenge to our beingness, to how we perceive ourselves and other selves. That is precisely what we're here for. We are here mostly to polarize, and we're not here exactly to do that, otherwise we're failing. It's just that, to use our time here, smartly or wisely, is to be aware of that. I'm not saying, go, not that you will go, but, it's the people should go on the streets and start finding catalysts, getting some signs and saying, I need catalysts, provide catalysts to me, please. It will come to you. Your higher self is there. That is the beauty of communicating with your higher self and saying, all right, what is the next thing in line that I need to process for me to liberate myself from the conditioning that I have from previous incarnations and from this incarnation. It could be a trauma as a child. It could be, a trauma. Again, I'll use the word trauma, especially because this session used it for, at work. Could be whatever, anything that you carry, or a perception, a wrong perception that you carry from whatever. That will provide you with the experience that you need. Just trust it. Trust that what's happening to you is what you need at the moment. And how do you process it? See the love in it. See how you can find love and wisdom in it. How you can relate to the experience, the person, and say, okay, based on my own understanding and wisdom, you don't have to go and say, I gotta search, how do I deal with a psychopathic boyfriend? You could. But how do you want to deal with it? How does your heart tells you? It's good to find help in other people, but try to foster, and nourish the help that you have in you. Nobody's more correct than yourself. So why not use it? So with that, there's so much we can talk about programming, especially programming, and how Catalyst is presented here and manifested, but that's the general gist that I want to share today. With that, we finish session 34. Session 35 is next week. Again, I didn't do my research, so I need to read it again and find out what we have. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching as usual, the whole hour. I'll see you in session 35.